Morning, everyone. Before we start, I don't know if anybody knows, we have a new deacon intern with us. He usually goes to the 5:30 Mass because of his work schedule. But Jose, would you just stand up, please? Jose Mateo. He is going to be with us for the year. He's going to be ordained next year, so we're trying to teach him well, but I'm not sure it's working. Our gospel today is from the Gospel of St. Mark. Mark is the shortest gospel writer of all the gospels. I don't think he would make a good priest because he says everything very concisely and moves on. I've never had a priest say anything concisely. They go on and on and on. But Mark does. He tells everyone exactly what they know about Jesus without embellishing a whole lot. But short doesn't necessarily mean simple. Mark's Gospels are very complex. In his stories, there's layer after layer after layer of things that his community can take upon themselves and reflect on. So as I was reading this Gospel about Bartimaeus, I was thinking, why does Mark put this in his Gospel? He's already talked about other healings Jesus does. What makes this one so different? And as I looked at it and prayed with it, I saw we could be here all day with all the different layers he has. You're not going to be. I just want to give you a couple examples of maybe something that's going to stick with you maybe throughout the week and ask yourself some questions. I'm going to tell you what stuck with me. The first thing I thought of is what happened to Bartimaeus after he regained his sight. I wonder if he became very human in the sense of starting to judge other people by the appearance, the clothes they wore, their skin tones. Because we have a tendency to do that, to look at other people and put them in a category by how they dress or what they look like. Did he fall into that same pattern of sin as we do? We could talk about how he was persistent in his prayer as he kept calling out, Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me. Are we persistent in our prayer? Even when the crowds told him to hush up, he didn't stop. So what do we do when the world tells us, be quiet? That's not how the world is. Do we privatize our faith? Or do we keep crying out to God and living out faith out by example and word? Perhaps we're as fickle as the crowd was, if you listen to that gospel. The beginning of it, they said, hush up, hush up. As soon as they said, hey, Jesus is calling to you, go, go, go. What about us? Are we one way with one group of friends and another way with another group of friends? Or we are consistent in our beliefs, our words, and our action? This short encounter has so much we could unpack. But the thing that stuck with me is maybe the drama of what was going on in this situation. And I think sometimes we don't get it because we don't place ourselves in the story or we don't know the culture of the time. To be a blind person at this time, you would sit at the edge of the road, you would spread out the only possession you had, which is really your cloak, and you would beg for alms from people as they were passing by. Now, the people wouldn't hand you money. They would throw it on the cloak because Lord knows if they touched you, they might catch the sin that you had that made them blind. So they would just toss the money on the person's cloak. When Jesus finally calls out to Bartimaeus, he throws his cloak aside, which means all the worldly possessions that he was collecting got scattered. And he was willing to do that for want of something better, his eyesight. And he did that even before Jesus cured him. He did it with listening to the voice of Jesus calling out to him. What about us? We've just had an encounter with Jesus. We had the word of God proclaimed to us. Are we willing to give up something because of this word? We're going to have another encounter with Jesus in the Eucharist. Are we willing to give up some of those things that we cling to in order to get something better? I hear a lot of people in confession talking about things like, oh, Father, I know that I spend too much time on my computer at work. I spend too much time scrolling through the internet, throwing through Facebook or Instagram or whatever's out there now. And say, pretty soon 2 hours have gone by and I know it's wrong and I want to stop, but I find myself going back to it. Are we willing to throw that away, to change with an encounter with Jesus? You know, sometimes we think these things that are necessities really aren't. Sometimes it's financial. Now, we have to look at our finances. We need to live. We need to make a living. Not saying anything with that. But sometimes we spend too much time dwelling and hoarding it that we're missing out on what Jesus is calling us to, a better life, a life of service. Sometimes we hoard our time because we don't have enough time. And in doing so, we neglect our brothers and sisters or our family. Perhaps some of the things we cling to are habits or addictions, a lot of those to name. Do we have those that we need to let go of and approach Jesus and say, heal me? Maybe it's anger or resentment. Maybe it's ego. Maybe it's a sense of not being loved by God, that we're unworthy. We need to divest ourselves of those things and approach Jesus like Bartimaeus. Throw away those things that we cling to and go for something that gives life and is better for us. May the intercession of Bartimaeus today allow us to just consider some of these things and ask ourselves, what do we need to let go of to have a deeper encounter with Christ?